It's Gridiron 360. We're back after it. I got Dave with me.
Hello.
I'm Bill. We are in the SEC still, talking 2020 NFL draft prospects. We covered everybody on the offensive side of the ball in the SEC. Now we're moving to the defense.
Love me some hitters.
The heavy hitters. This one, the SEC obviously has been a little lengthier in terms of the number of casts we put out for these prospects, but the SEC is the best division in college football. They're very deep. I think
it's a draft year for them.
It's a great draft year, as it usually is. I think the Big Ten actually has the most prospects in terms of where they rank, like top prospects, but in terms of the most depth of prospects, it's coming from the SEC. So that's why we are taking some time on this. Today, we're going to start with those gents we love to watch on the outside, the edge rusher DNs in the Southeastern Conference.
Yep.
We'll run through the top four we see in this conference on this one. We'll dice it up, jump back on, and throw out another 4 or 5 names you should know about. But we're going to start with the top names in the SEC in terms of edge rusher. Where are we going to go first?
Why don't we go to the champs?
All right, let's go to the champs. Now, this guy was, he's listed right now as an edge rusher. He's a linebacker, but they could put him as an outside or an edge. Mr. K'Lavon Chaisson from the LSU Tigers. If you remember when we were talking about our offensive linemen, that LSU has only allows players on their teams to wear the number 18 that are leaders. It's a leadership role number. You wear that number if you're a leader on the team. We talked about a guy on the offensive line for LSU that wore it, and that was their center, Mr. Cushenberry. Lloyd Cushenberry. On the defensive side of the ball, Chaisson wore the number 18. He's a redshirt sophomore from Houston, Texas, 6'3", 254, 32 1/4-inch arms, 9 7/8-inch hands. One of the top prospects in this class when it comes to edge rusher. Again, he played a lot of linebacker in college, but there's looking like they're going to get him over here to the edge at the next level. And we've talked about how drafts in past years, there's been a lot of prospects at the edge that are quite exciting. And this year it's been a little shallow compared to years prior for the edge rushers, especially stars. We know Chase Young, and kind of the next guy is A.J. Epineza from Iowa. And again, Chaisson is starting to get mixed in there. He's probably one of the top prospects from a linebacker perspective, but it looks like they're going DN with him, edge rusher. So now he's kind of vaulting into this mix.
Yeah, what is kind of interesting to me in looking at, the prospects that you and I put up on the board that we're going to discuss over the next podcast is a lot of tweeners. And not just tweener, linebacker to DN tweener, but also like interior tweeners, whether some of these guys are, if they're quote-unquote edge, going to play like in a odd front formation DN, like a 3-4 DN, as opposed to, like Chaisson to me is definitely in that tweener range because you get, you look at size now, you're probably looking anywhere between probably on your true DN, anywhere from probably high 250s to probably around 275, I would say, is what you see. But here's the thing is, to be a true DN in a 4-3, like, again, we'll use like guys like Khalil Mack, who plays an outside linebacker. There's a guy that's, about 250. I think he's probably about 255, 253, something like that. This guy kind of falls into that range with me. It's because you've got to be able to have the speed to power. And we're going to talk when we get to the Big Ten about Chase Young. And Chase Young is just an edge guy. I don't care what you do. You throw him out there on the edge and you just let him roll. I don't care what kind of defense you're running. This guy's going to have to fit in somewhere. I think he's probably on a little bit of the light side. He has gained some weight because those are his combine numbers.
Yeah.
His season numbers were around the 246. So the question is, can he keep that weight on? I saw like on the combine, NFL combine section, they always give you a comparison, and one of his comparisons was Aldon Smith.
I saw that.
Who has who's reintroducing himself to the NFL. But if you looked at him, he was a tall, lanky guy who actually showed much more power than a guy his size, and that allowed him to play in that kind of defense. Now, he played under Fangio, and Fangio was a 3-4 guy, so that you're talking about an outside linebacker. I think he kind of fits in that mold. Who he kind of reminds me of is a little bit of the guy from Boston College. Was it from last year? Was it Landry? Was he drafted last year?
Landry. Yeah, he went to the Titans. Harold Landry.
Yeah, from a build standpoint. This wasn't a prolific defense in the front seven. I mean, I think you saw it by how many points they had scored on him in some of these games, but he stood out to me on that defense, and the defense definitely was very strong on the back end. But they needed some level of pressure from up front, and I think this kid's he's got the right kind of build to be somebody that in the right defense, I think he's got a career ahead of him. He can be a decent player. I don't know that I would consider him dominant. I don't know how many guys. There's a couple of guys on here I think could be dominant. Again, I want to be careful from the, when we talk about interior to comparing anybody to Aaron Donald, from the exterior, comparing anybody to Von Miller and Khalil Mack, those kind of guys. But, most teams don't have those guys. So, and they do pretty well. There's some pretty good defensive teams out there that don't have that kind of talent. So that's kind of my thought on him. I don't know what you think.
Well, this is a fast guy in terms of, he fits definitely the linebacker mold in my mind. I mean, he's got great lateral. He moves side to side very well. He's fast. He can change directions and go quickly. He seems to be a smart kid, especially, being donned with this 18. That's a leadership number. Yep. This is a smart guy, a leader on the defense. One thing that does concern me a little bit is if you watch on some of the games where they had mobile offensive linemen, he seems to have a tough time with. So on pull blocks,
yep,
he gets caught up. If he doesn't see the pull block coming, the guy gets to him. And that really kind of goes into too with a zone blocking scheme. If you have linemen moving that can move in space, if he's not able to find his hole and they get their hands on him, it seems like he can have a tough time. And something that's super important for an edge rusher that I think he definitely needs to work on, much like I hoped my man Vic Beasley that came out a few years ago, who had great speed and stuff, but something he really needed to work on, and I don't think he really got better at, is his handwork. It's may not be as important at the linebacker position, but from an edge perspective, you got to have great handwork, and I don't know if he has it. I mean, there's times I've saw him, try to use his hands, but it's kind of unruly, just kind of no technique, just kind of slapping around.
Yeah,
that will have to be honed in if they are going to seriously put him down at the edge where he's got to deal with some big beasts, and usually if it's you're an edge, you're taking on a tackle, the arms and hands are usually longer and bigger respectively. Yep. So you got to be able to get those suckers off you so you can make some moves. He did tear an ACL in 2018, just to note. Yep. And another thing that I thought was interesting that I read on him, he hadn't played really a whole ton of ball in high school. Mm-hmm. He went with a friend, I think I saw it, to like an LSU football camp to earn a scholarship. And he ended up being like a 4-star, but I don't know that he played like a down of varsity football, man. I'm serious. Like, I don't think he played or at least started hardly at all. So that, in my mind, is a good thing. You got a guy that showed in very small window the ability to play this game and at a high level at that, and talk best conference, best division in college football, great competition on a really good team, notoriously with a great defense. And so in a very short amount of time, this kid has learned to play this game at a very high level, which tells me it might be a little bit of a project for some teams moving him to that position as an edge, but he's definitely coachable. And this is somebody that can grow, and I don't think he's really reached the peak of what he can do. He's got a lot left in the tank. So that's something I think that is, for those drafting him, you could be excited about. You got a good coach to coach him up, and I think you have a lot to work with there.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I think this guy's a definite 3-4 outside linebacker because you are going to send him to rush the passer more than you're going to drop him back into coverage. Though you need to be able to cover, especially in the flat, and you need to be able to drop out into certain zone coverages when the ball's going the other way. One of the things kind of interesting, one of his tweets, this was just actually from a couple of days ago, and it kind of talks about, his learning. He wrote, "Nobody taught me the game. I learned this ish day by day, F up after F up." So it's a guy that kind of has an idea, understands that, and knows that he's got some learning to do. I think there is, I think there's definitely an opportunity for him. I would see him being more of a situational pass rusher early on in his career. Not coming in. I definitely don't see this guy playing like a Sam or a weak side linebacker in a 4-3. He's not that guy. I think he's definitely going to be coming after the quarterback more times than not. You like the pedigree, and I love the leadership. Like if he's got an attitude and a willingness to work, like that was kind of one of the things about Aldon Smith before he had his complete breakdown mentally, was that he had a want to. He had another gear, and again, he was not the biggest guy in the world, but you kind of mentioned some about his handwork. Here's the thing is you can only speed rush so many times, and you've got to be able to hand fight and knock guys off balance. You've got to have inside moves when you're playing in a 3-4, which requires that hand fighting. So, I mean, there's some things he's got a little bit of a project, I think, but situationally he could come in, I think, third down kind of guy in his first year or two and still be very effective. I think he's an interesting draft pick.
And let's talk about draft.
Teams have that.
Do you expect him in the first?
No, I would
think so?
I would say probably not. Now, because here's why. I keep seeing he's kind of my bell cow is Epineza, because he had a rough combine and and he was injured and there was all kinds of talk about him. Yet I don't see him in a lot of places moving ahead. But again, the draft can surprise. But I think he's probably a second round talent. And remember, we want to say this, and you'll see as we kind of go through these guys, the edge is thin this year, I think.
I think he could slip in late in the first. Like the last pick of the draft is the Chiefs. I think that's a team that could pick a guy like this up.
It depends on where the push is at. I mean, there's going to be some runs in this draft, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And the question becomes, when is that going to be? And there's some really, really deep positions we've talked about. I think, wide receiver is very deep. Running back is very deep. There's a lot of value in later rounds, which might slow down those positions. I think the tackle's strong, offensive tackle, but I do think we've already talked about him, and some of the guys are from the SEC. Those guys are going to go early because I think that's a critical position. So this, it really kind of depends on how the draft falls. I would project him to be probably somewhere in 3 to 5 range of DNs, edge rushers taken. That's kind of probably maybe closer to 5, somewhere around that area. I guess would be my guess on him.
Yeah.
But again, I think he's got to be in the right situation.
Oh, yeah.
You still have a lot of teams in the NFL running 4-3s, and I don't see where he fits in that area. I look at him, and while his frame could maybe carry some more weight, I'm not sure how well placed that would be at this point. And again, I'm no physiologist, but just some guys just look like they can pack it on. Like
Right.
Alden Smith always looked like he could put on more weight. He never did, didn't need to. But when I look at him as a projection type guy, that's kind of what I see.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I like this guy. I think he could be. There's a lot of the intangibles with
Yes.
this guy
Yep.
that make him very attractive to me. Not have anything to do with his athleticism or his play on the field. And we just went through
Yeah.
it. Not just a
Yeah.
leader. He's young. He's a redshirt sophomore. He's not played football a lot. That tweet you read was very telling to me. This is a guy that, he's willing to learn and grow, and whether he has the support or he doesn't. And, when he gets to the next level, he's going to have every bit of support he needs to excel. So I think that in and of itself makes him a very interesting prospect to me. I think he could, if he ends up in edge rusher, okay. But if he is in the right place, in a 4-3 where he's one of the linebackers on the outside, I think he'll end up being that could be more comfortable, more home, more a place of success. But we'll have to see. Let's move on to the next guy, my friend.
You pick him.
Let's go to the Auburn Tigers, because they had, in my mind, no matter what had happened throughout the year, still the best overall defensive line in college football. I mean, let's talk about it if you don't agree. I think they were awesome. One of the guys that was a big reason for that, Mr. Marlon Davidson.
All right.
Marlon Davidson, he is a senior from Greenville, Alabama, 6'3", 303, 33-inch arms, 10-inch hands. Just in my mind, a beast off the edge of this year. Ran about a 5.04 40. Not great, but not awful. They are big guys. This guy started all 4 years at Auburn. Again, started all 4 years at Auburn. Now, one of the things, and we talked about this a lot with a team like Alabama, and yes, I said this, I think as a whole, was the best D-line in college football. Derek Brown, his teammate, was also on that line.
Yep.
So one of the things you always wonder is because of all the studs they had there in that front.
Who made who?
Who made who, right? Who was it? Was it simply he's a good player, or because they were really good, he had less attention, was able to do his thing? I will say that Derek Brown definitely overshadowed, not bad, but overshadowed Davidson a bit. He was the guy that everybody thought was the number one stud on that D-line.
Yeah, this is kind of interesting. Again, we're talking about tweeners, and this is interesting. He was listed on ESPN and a few other sites, and I'm assuming this was his senior year tagged weight and height at 6'3", 278.
Oh, yeah. This is a good thing to go into. Did I give him the 303,
Yeah, you
right?
gave him the 303, which is what the Combine is listing, and I'm seeing those variations on different sites. So my guess is, since the Combine has a weigh-in that he weighed in heavier, they're all calling him a D-end. And even still at 303, still calling him a D-end, which to me, 303 D-end screams interior, odd front, 3-4
Yeah, I mean,
D-end.
this is a guy, he's better suited lining up, I think, outside the tackle. I mean, he's an outside tackle guy, but that might not necessarily be the edge.
Yeah, he had his, just to give you an idea, as you mentioned, he played 4 years straight. He had his best statistical season across the board. He had 49 total tackles, 30
This past
solos.
year he did.
Seven
That's
and a
great.
half sacks.
See, how I talk about progression in this game.
Yep.
It's good to see, everybody weighs so much with the Combine. Progression in college makes more sense to me.
Yeah, and seven and a half sacks, playing more of an interior position or a run stuffing edge. It's pretty good. 2 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery.
Yep.
He was very active. There was a guy
Blocked 3 kicks last year.
Yeah, and here's another one.
Blocked
I'll tell you.
3 kicks.
Yeah,
That's good stuff right there. That's an added dimension.
Yeah, he's I think this kid's got a lot of talent. I think I kind of got to figure out the fit, for this guy as far as where teams are seeing him.
Do you think he's better based on the tape? Because he'll play a 3 technique or he'll play standing up. Ooh, based on what you've seen this past year, what do you think he's better at? Personally, in watching him, I think he's better at in the 3 technique, coming up out of his stance and blasting people.
Yeah, he can.
But he's got good hands. He's good at stunts, which sometimes are easier to run when you're in the two when you're standing up. If you see him lined up against a tight end, there were some really good tight ends that he had to play against. He mashes some of them, man. Like if he's against a tight end, not an offensive tackle, I've seen him manhandle tight ends.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to tell because I can definitely, if he plays on the outside, which he's good at, I see him as more of like your run in a 4-3, like more of your run stuffing DN. Again, not that he can't get to the quarterback, but you're going to need some speed on the other side to counter kind of his play. I like that he played all 4 years, but at the same time, I also kind of look at his production was not amazing. And especially when you talk about like a Derek Brown being in the middle for you, who's probably commanding double teams constantly, where does that bode for him? I think that's something that they're going to have to figure out from the NFL. Like, I don't really know the answer to that. That's why I said, like, there's a lot of, like, tweeners, and this guy's more of a tweener on the big side of end.
Yeah, not like Chase on. He's the other side, the little side tweener, like linebacker / edge. This guy's D-tackle / edge. And there's a lot of people that have said, that I've read, a lot of scouts, that they're not sure of the fit for him. Is he going to be better slapped down inside? Maybe put in a little more weight than he already has. If he was 270, I don't know when that differential in weight came in. That's a good, 25-pound differential.
Yep.
And if it happened in a short amount of time from when the season ended to the combine that he was able to gain some weight, then he's probably still able to put a little more on.
Well, I guess that's.
And in that case, then you drop him down.
If he can handle weight change, then I guess you kind of can look. You got some flexibility, but I think they say this a lot in the NFL, and I think it's really true. It's kind of like when they say you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have any. Yeah. I think when you don't have a position, you know what I mean? When you're not sure of a position, you don't really have one. Somebody's really going to have to see something and determine it. I like him. I don't love him. Just because I don't know how to fit him in. Because here's the question is, do you lighten him up, move him outside, have him as a run stuffer? And if you can get 7 sacks out of him a year, great. You've done well if you've got a speed rusher on the other side. But I'm not sure he can get 7 sacks, again, he's going to be going against some incredibly athletic tackles, and it's just going to be a challenge for him. So then the other side is, do you thicken him up, but can he maintain a pass rush? Because you're really more of a 3 technique in a 4-3.
Yeah.
Maybe the answer is he's that outside DN in an odd man front, where they're a little bit oversized. He's not particularly tall, though. A lot of those guys are usually a little taller than 6'3". They just are. That's just what you see out of it. But,
You think he's a first rounder?
No.
No. I don't think so. But I do think he'll go on the second day. I think he'll go in the second round.
You think he's a I'm not even certain he's a second rounder.
I think he'll go in the second in my mind, but just because, again, I think that was the best defensive line in college football, and there's something to be said for that, whether he had the talent around him or not.
Okay. All right, fair enough. I got to admit, I'm a little bit unsure about him, so I don't want to make any statements. I like some of the things I see, and certainly can't deny how dominant they were. something just doesn't fit that I can put my finger on.
All right. Well, let's move on. We've taken a while, but those are the top two guys in this conference at that position. So we're going to talk about two more real quick, both from the University of Florida Gators. You have Jabari Zuniga and Jonathan Grenard. So let's talk about Zuniga first. He's from right up the road here, Marietta, Georgia. A redshirt senior, 6'3", 264, 32 and 7/8 inch arms, 10 and 3/8 inch hands. Ran a 4.64 40 at the combine, threw up 29 bench reps. This guy, he was the big play man on their defense, especially on their front. When it was, I think maybe it was, what game was it? Was it the George game? One of the games he was out, and there was a lot of concern that they were going to struggle because Zuniga wasn't in there. He had some injury problems, especially this past year. He played, but he was in and out.
Yeah.
But this is definitely a guy that I think is more of all, we're talking about these guys that could be tweeners. This guy is, I think, defensive end edge rusher all the way. He was a basketball kid growing up. Only played football in high school for a year. Got bigger. Went on to the SEC, to Florida. Like I said, he had some injuries in his career, starting right out the gates all the way through this year. But there were times where he'd play through the injuries. It wasn't like huge ACL season ending, and he just tried to tough it out and play through. Whether that should have been to his detriment or not, long term, I don't know. Comp on him is Robert Quinn.
That's a nice comp.
That is a nice comp.
I'm not sure that I buy that comp, but that's a nice comp. Here's the thing about Zuniga. If I could just kind of sum him up, and he is from my arch rival, Florida Gators. I've seen him a bunch, play a bunch. When I watch this guy play, there are times where I look at him and I'm like, this guy's a surefire first rounder
Right.
over the last two years in particular, but really even his 3 years, he's had some good. And then there's some injury background there, but then there's also games where he just doesn't show
Right.
up, and
I agree.
The
There are
the
games
consistency
against
with him.
teams that might not be as good too,
Yeah.
and you expect him against lesser opponents to dominate, and it's almost like he plays the level of his competition.
Yeah, and halfway through his junior year, it was like, this guy's a first rounder. Like, that was the mentality of like how good this guy is. And I'm not even sure he goes in front of the guy that we're talking about next. Like, I don't see the consistency, and that will murder you in the NFL. That will murder you. Maybe he gets with the right coach. Maybe it's just, a lack of, let's be honest, Florida's had their coaching problems too. They had coaching problems, up until the last couple of years, not so much on defense. And remember, this was a front seven that was generally thought of as one of the best in college football too. Not quite to the level that was the expectation coming into 2019 of Auburn, but they were pretty close. And there were games where, as a unit, they played really well, but I expected that guy to dominate.
Yeah.
I expected him to dominate too many times, and I'd watch, and I'd be like, why is everybody talking about this guy? And I don't want to dog him. But it was just like, I've seen games where he's been like, whoa, he's good. But then other games where I've been like,
When you see him in the games where he's good, like, he looks like a true dominant edge rusher to me. Like, he's got power.
Little small maybe, but not too small.
He's got power. He's got he's got speed. He's rangy. I guess overall, I think his strengths, if you're looking at the body and the makeup of the kid, I think from basically the midsection up, guys really got a lot of great tools working with him. From the midsection below is where he needs a little work. Like, he's not the strength of of maybe anchoring down and using his lower body with some the power in his lower body to move guys is something I think he needs work on. Okay, like if he gets hit and if he stands straight up or comes off the ball and he's a little more vertical and an offensive lineman has gotten his hands on him, I noticed like he can sometimes struggle pushing back, and that's all in your lower body.
Yeah.
Now, if he gets where the offensive lineman's not like directly getting his hands on him. He's got a little bit of space to work with. He can use his upper body skills to get around him.
Yeah.
But, everybody's good in the NFL, man. So, and you got to be able to have the total package. But I agree with you. There are games you watch on this guy, and it's just like, whoa.
Yeah, that's like a total maybe I'm just watching the wrong games. This is a perspective all of my own. None of what I like, nothing about what I read. I just heard too much and I just don't see it every time. And I will tell you, if I'm drafting in the first 3 rounds, if I am not completely confident that person has a high motor, I'm not picking that guy. That's kind of just, and I'm not talking about him specifically. I'm just talking about in general.
No, I get you.
If I question a guy's motor,
yeah,
because your first 3 rounds,
competitive toughness. Look, that's one of the 5 main things that NFL scouts look at. One of the 5. If I have to go back to them, but there's speed, there's strength, but one of them is competitive toughness. And I don't know if he checks that box, if he's playing a level of his competition, or you like you said, you see one guy one game and a different guy the next.
Yep. I want to see guys dominate, and sometimes I didn't see it.
Yep. All right, let's go on to his counterpart, Mr. Jonathan Grenard, who's a redshirt senior from Georgia. He also played for Florida. 6'3", 263, 34 7/8 inch arms, 9 1/4 inch hands, ran a 4.87 40, 22 on the bench. Let's see, who they comp this guy to? Dante Fowler, which is, to be honest with you, he's kind of been a disappointment in the NFL.
Yeah, he was a guy, honestly, I would say this. Watching him at Florida, he dominated more to me than these guys did, at least from my just visual watching him. But he also, sometimes I felt like the motor wasn't always running as hot as it should be.
So is that more of a product of the guys or the team and the coaching, man? I mean, if your motor's not there, to me, that has a lot to do with the coaching. Is if you don't have that competitive toughness. I mean, you look at, my Clemson Tigers, all those guys. It could be the last piece on the defense, I don't want to say the worst piece, but the least strong piece of the defense. And our guys are playing their hearts out constantly.
Yeah, now
and that's coaching.
I'm not. I want to say, when I was saying that, I'm not talking about Grenard. What I like about him is this was a front that was exposed to be good for the last couple of years. And he didn't play in 2018, but 2017 he had a good year. He had an even better year in 2019. He was very active, 9.5 sacks. That's not anything you can sneeze at. Had 3 forced fumbles. So I don't know. I like this kid a little bit more. I like his size a little bit more. God, he had a pick. I didn't even realize that. He had a pick, which is nice, just a guy that's kind of probably, helps keeping your head up when you're rushing the passer. 4 pass defenses, so he blocked 4 passes. I mean, this is a guy that is, if you can get to the quarterback, yet still keep your hands up, and you need to be disruptive. That's what this needs to be. I like this guy more as a prospect, and I could see him going higher. In fact, I didn't realize this kid's from Hiram, Georgia, so he's right around the corner too.
Yeah, both of them are from from right around us. So, a guy that I don't think he'll go day one, but he's definitely a guy that between the 2nd and 4th round, he may end up getting picked up.
Yeah, oh yeah, I think he should. I mean, and then you got to remember, there is something about where you came from. It's kind of happened with some Alabama guys over time. Not saying most of them didn't deserve it. I'm just saying it. Just you're in the product of, and defensively, they had some bad years under McElwain, but it was more offensive disarray. There were some decent defenses there. So I like this kid. I could see him. Like I said, I think he goes ahead as an Ega. I think he's a good player.
All right. Well, that's good. We're going to dice it up. That takes care of the top 4 edge rushers, at least as we see them listed for the 2020 NFL Draft in the SEC. Again, Clavon Chason from LSU, Marlon Davidson from Auburn, Jabari Zuniga, and Jonathan Grenard from the University of Florida. We'll dice it up. We'll get back on here and talk about a few other edge names in the SEC. And see you next time
on the gridiron.
Peace.